Uh,
Okay.
okay, great. And Bob Oxenberg sends his regrets. He's really sorry he's missing this live. All
Okay.
right, so Ramsay, the founder of this historical history study group, and we used to be called Great Decisions, had a lot of different names. But he and Janet were the founder for how many years did you run it out of the Lutheran
A
Church?
substantial number, yeah. We all got old in the meantime.
And it was great. We learned world history, we learned American history, and then all the different regions where the great decisions took us. So,
Yeah,
a
for
firm
sure.
background. A lot of you were there live for this. Ramsay, I'm not going to talk about the content because I might spoil it. So, Ramsay, take it away.
Okay.
Oh, now comes the test. Let's see if this works.
Mhm.
Yep. Screen.
Everyone got a PowerPoint?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
all okay here?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, good.
Whoa.
All
Good.
right. All right. Well, we'll see how this goes. I said to a few people this,
Hey, Ramsey, go over to slideshow and play from current slide.
okay,
We'll do it from the beginning, which
Okay.
yeah,
is,
current slide.
yeah,
His slideshow, Jen.
yeah,
Okay.
Current slide.
right. Slideshow.
Got it.
Here's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you.
No.
No, 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 no. Nope. Why not resume slideshow? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that it?
There you go.
We're okay. All right. So I mentioned to John, there used to be large numbers of articles I'd read and say, well, this is making sense to me. This is making, now I understand the world. I understand the world. There haven't been many of those recently. The world's been too confusing. And then this article from the recent Foreign Affairs article showed up, Foreign Affairs edition showed up. So the goal was to get to this guy, Buckley, who was or Beckley, whose article I sort of liked, and I hope you read it. If you get it, if John sent it out. What's the screen about? I think some of us, John and I, particularly, maybe all of you, I love these books where you get this overview of history and you can see if you test yourself to see if you know this stuff and put it all together and get big trends big trends going one time or another. Bob Kelso sent this one. This is a pretty good one. I'm going to turn it sideways so you can see it a little bit better. We're not going to go over this, but if you ever have a chance to look at this, this is one of these fantastic overviews of here's what was going on in history for a long period of time. I want to focus on hey, go test yourself. If you know all these things, you know enough history. Start reading novels. But let's focus on this last 300 years of that timeline because that's what this guy Beckley focuses on. And his point of view about how to describe this last 300 years is fascinating to me. I like it. That's why I wanted to share this article a little bit. Now we're not working, Chad. What happened? What did you do?
I didn't do
There we go.
anything.
Okay, back up. Here's another one of these overview over a long period of time visuals that someone found somewhere. Have a look quickly at suggesting that the West was sort of a latecomers in terms of wealth. But there's that white line. See that white line over there at the 1700? And the reason for that white line is because everything right of that white line is 300 years. Everything to the right is 1700 years. So that's really not a very accurate diagram. That would be closer to the reality. It's not quite as elegant as it ought to be, but just to make the point, the West was a latecomer in wealth, and this is what this guy Michael Beckley has to say about the last 300 years. For centuries, the rise and fall of the great powers has unleashed plenty of
If you could all.
Michael, mute.
Great. Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah.
In essence, he's saying this is probably one of the most awful times in world history, this last 300 years. Over on the left, we got all these books that some of us are familiar with. John and I are deeply enamored of the one way on the right. I mean, on the left. The Rise of the West rules, modern history of the modern world. It's all about the West.
The West.
The West, the West, the West. Down the bottom is an AP World Civilizations textbook that we actually went through one year, and it does sort of the same thing. Says, well, the civilization really got rolling to really great stuff once the West took over, and now we're all going to be democratic, capitalistic, blah blah blah. And Beckley wants to say, no, these have been a pretty awful 300 years. And it will be awfully wonderful if what I predict is true, that it's about to end, because they were miserable, lots of violence. A few people, a few societies, a few civilizations really did well. Many, many more were battered. But the era of rising powers, Britain, Germany, the United States, China, Russia, Soviet Union, and so forth, has all been pretty violent. And the circumstances which gave rise to the ability of newcomers to rise to challenging powers is about over. He says, here's 3 reasons. The demographic boom that has fueled that is not only stalling, it's about to reverse. And of course, most of us hear that would celebrate. That's fantastic. There was way too many people anyway, and if there's going to be less people, that's going to be good for humanity. And Beckley will concede, well, it might be in the long term, but in the short term, it's not going to be all that good. He argues productivity is slowing, even though we have industrial breakthroughs galore, and that the large territorial acquisitions that fueled the rise of some of these big powers, that era is probably pretty much over too. It may be true that Russia picks off a few bits of the Ukraine, but not much. Not the kind of stuff that Russia did back in the 17th, 18th, and 19th century. So I'm just so a suggestion. If you read it, I'm just repeating what you've already read. In the long run, this could be very good for humanity, but in the short run, it could be pretty awful. The next 30, 40, whatever years could be every bit as violent as the end of the 20th century for a variety of reasons. And these are the 4 he tends to focus on, that the fragile states, Russia's one of them. He even thinks China's fragile, could well start to buckle. And when they start to buckle, these powers may go after some territory nearby, Taiwan, yada, 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 to placate their people. Economic insecurity is clearly causing problem in democracies. And to his credit, he's willing to put it to figure out the United States. The U.S. is drifting away from its partial leadership of world peace and turning into some pretty awful thuggish unilateralism. And once again, Jan, I don't know what's going on, and I can't move this. There we go. So some background, and I was warned by a colleague that said, there's a bunch of good stuff here, but don't spend too much time on it. People either know this or they don't. Why can't our leaders get us back to normal? And of course, normal is in quotes because normal is not really all that normal. What's normal for many of the MAGA, many of us, many of those of us that lived through this incredible period, 1950 to fairly recently, this so-called social contract that is now, by most people's admission, badly broken, where at least in the West and Japan too, citizens were willing to say, yeah, okay, I'll accept private property. I'm not sure if private property is all the best thing, but I'll accept that. But in return, having fought and died in World War II, I want good education for my kids, housing, healthcare, retirement, blah, blah, blah. All of that paid for higher taxes. Why can't we just get back to that? And the answer would surely be, from both Piketty's point of view and from this Beckley's point of view, is because that graph right there in front of us is the right hand side is simply not normal. This notion that we'll do the numbers in a minute, but I think all of us know that couldn't possibly go on forever. This extraordinary rise in human population in only 200 years. And once again, there's a pretty awful attempt to make that graph look a little bit more like it looks like. I mean, here's some actual numbers. Took 200,000 to 300,000 years for humanity, for Homo sapiens population to get up to 1 billion in the year 1804. And then in another 200 years, mere 200 years, the human population jumped from 1 billion to 8 billion. And of course, we've lived through that. And so life has gotten better, and you sort of shrug your shoulders and say, well, whatever. But we all know with the climate problems and other problems that are now increasingly obvious every day that that something's going on, and so I'm going to bypass this thing. When Piketty wrote his book and published it in 2014, these were the pretty standard predictions of population growth. This is not a graph showing population decline. It's a graph showing the decline in population growth over the 21st century. And you can see if you look at the line, the bottom line, the x-axis is zero population growth. And the blue line doesn't quite get there by year 2100, but soon thereafter. And that was sort of assumed to be the right prediction. It has changed in the meantime. And The Economist recently has had several pretty big articles on that change. One just a couple of weeks ago. This was the cover of the magazine. And if I can quote it for you, the speed with which the norm of marriage, indeed of relationship of any sort, is being abandoned worldwide is startling. And they go on to say, we're not quite sure exactly what's going on, but we know it is going on. Among Americans alone, ages 25 to 34, half of the men have no partner, 41% of the women have no partner. It's a astonishing drop in marriage, in fertility, blah, blah, blah. There's some graphs from about a month ago in The Economist over on the right, I'm sorry, is total fertility rates. The bottom line down there, the line down below is the replacement line. We used to call it 2.2, now they call it 2.1 because medicine is so much better. Almost every country in the world was above and way above that replacement line. And then you get to 2023, you can see that most of the world, including the biggest countries, are below that replacement line, and others following suit quickly. Here's another Economist graph. The red line is the update from 2014, and showing the fertility rates by 2030 are now predicted to hit the 2.1 replacement level, which doesn't mean, of course, that even if that happens, that the population will start shrinking then, because you got a lot of babies born, some will at least reproduce. But it does suggest that only in 11 years, the predictions about how fast human population will decline, will start declining, has accelerated. There's another Economist graph, not that hard to interpret if I give you some help here, saying if the red line is the one to focus on. If the current fertility rates continue at this current same level for 25 years, that is a graph of human population out to the year 2100. So we peak about 2050, start falling for the next 50 years, never get to 10 billion, which is, again, we'd all say that's fantastic. And if the trend only lasts 15 years, you get the pink line or the orange line. Only 5 years, you still never get to 10. The dotted line up top is what the UN prediction was. So it's coming, or seems to be coming. And The Economist said, here's a graph that we sort of we'll give it to you. That some demographers say, well, look, these lines are they're going down so fast. It's probably not going to change. There's probably going to be an inflection point where these various countries start having more babies, and it maybe stabilizes below 2.1, but and the economist says, yeah, well, they can predict that, but there's no trend, there's no evidence whatsoever at the time being that those inflection lines, those dotted lines, are actually going to happen. So population is going to start going down at some stage. Picking as quickly as we can go through this. I'm looking at my clock as I want to say it's at least 20 minutes to get back to this article I wanted to share with. But those of you who went through the Piketty stuff remember this. I mean, you see, here's why I'm writing this book. We've done decades now, me, my colleagues, and many others, and it's all pretty much confirmed now. It's no longer controversial. Research on the wealth distribution across the planet, across the United States, across countries, blah, blah, blah. And people ought to know what's going on here, and otherwise we can't have real democratic debates. And he was, I probably should have released this one, but I'll throw it in anyway. Jen and I are hoping to be in Bhutan next November. And I mean, it's rather, they've got a king there. The kings have been pretty good. Here's a king saying, you know, I know there's problems with with kings like me, but democracy is, I've studied in England. It looks like it only works well when you have pretty much a perfect society. You have to have a society that's very literate, very politically conscious, high level of prosperity. It's good for him, which is pretty much exactly what James Madison was saying back in Philadelphia in 1787. Said, we don't want democracy. We're not anywhere near ready for democracy in the United States yet. We don't have any of these qualities that the Bhutanese king is saying. Bob Kelso forwarded this on yesterday, an article from just yesterday. There are various little places around the planet. Here's one in Belgium that are trying to do a little bit better with their democratic institutions. So this little 80,000 person part of Belgium, German speaking, off to the east. They said, look, we know our politicians are not doing a good job. Let's try to give them some citizenship input. So every year they send out about 1,500 letters asking people, anyone interested in joining the 30 that are chosen randomly. Those that say yes are 30 are chosen randomly. They sit around for the weekend in a nice setting. They're given problems to solve, come up with recommendations. The Belgian assemblymen are not required to fulfill what they recommend, but they have to take it in consideration. The various people that sit in these sessions pretty much all say the same thing. Apparently, it said it was good for us with different opinions to sit down and be told you have to come up with a solution. I heard an article, I heard a report just the other day. There's areas around the United States that are trying somewhat similar. What was it? Nashville, Tennessee. But what they're doing it by having people vote on problems, and they said it doesn't work because no one votes. You get 2% of the people that even pay attention. So we're abandoning the voting idea. In any case, there's problems with democracy. Back to Piketty's, tons of stuff from Piketty, but among the most revealing graphics that he had in several of his chapters was this graphic. The information here summarized in this graphic. Output is simply GDP growth, basically, which for most of human history was pretty much zero or teeny tiny little bits. But as the Industrial Revolution starts, it starts accelerating. Then Piketty makes the point, a very effective point, that really, if you're talking about human economic growth, it's basically two components that are going to.
I wanted to vacuum, so
Someone's vacuuming. So there's basically two components that create that economic growth in a society. One, if you have a growing population, obviously more people means people need more stuff. That's going to increase economic growth. And of course, technological productivity. If fewer people can produce the same amount of stuff because of machinery and electric power and blah, 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 then you can get more stuff produced as well, as long as it's consumed. But if we could just focus on the bottom two lines, this period that we all spent most of our life in, almost all of our life, except the most recent area, where world economic growth was about 3.8% on average per year for 62 years. Half of that, according to Piketty's calculations, was population growth, half of it increasing the technological efficiency, more produced by less people. He says that may have been wonderful, but it's coming to an end. This was Piketty's prediction now.
Hey, Janet Thomas, this is Tom Farr. Janet,
Tom?
if you can you mute everybody except for Ramsay? There's background chatter coming in from other people.
I don't know that Janet can, but she can try.
John, can you step her through that?
No, I'll look.
Uh,
Could
you're not
everyone
the
mute
host.
themselves, please?
Yeah, if everyone can mute themselves, there is background noise. I'm sorry. We're sorry.
With the PowerPoint on, I can't find the, go ahead, Rims.
You
Yeah,
can't do it
sorry,
'cause you're not
sorry.
the host.
Let's do the best we can. Those of you that haven't muted, please do so. Are we okay here for the time being? All right, focus on the bottom two lines. Piketty was going to say, our population is going to stop growing and start declining eventually. So the more people need, you're going to get economic growth because you got more people. That's going to decline substantially. He predicted a 0.4% population growth in the 21st century up to 21. And he had a couple chapters on technological growth. This was pretty controversial among he and his colleagues. He eventually put in his book, I'll accept 1.6. I myself doubt that it will be that high. But we'll go with those numbers. So save that for a moment. Background on this guy. Some of you are very familiar with this, and this will be boring. But if not, if you never heard this, this matters to some degree. Simon Kuznets was probably the most famous economist in the United States in World War II and after World War II. He was a Lithuanian Jew born in Russia. His family immigrated to the U.S. in 1922, studied at Columbia. He was hired by Roosevelt when the New Deal started to say, look, we're going to try all these experiments and getting ourselves out of the Depression. Frankly, we have no measures of what the hell is going on. Could you invent one? It was he primarily that came up with what was then called GNP, now GDP. Kuznets, by the way, said, don't ever, ever use this measure of economic growth as a measure of social health. It's not that. Oh, well. But he also, in 1955, came up with what he was called the Kuznets curve. The Kuznets curve was pretty basic. He said, Jan, I don't know why this keeps happening. I cannot go forward.
Push down harder.
Okay, hold on here. We're stuck. I don't know what's happened. I'm sorry. Now what? Now what? There we go. The Kuznets curve basically said inequality. Obviously, you can see it's going up over there on the right and coming down on the left. I mean, vice versa, up on the left. And his argument was, look, it's true that in early growth of capitalist societies, inequality gets worse. But as they get richer, he says, I don't really know what's going on, but it seems that the inequality starts to go in the other direction. The more advanced the capitalist societies, the less inequality. And so Thomas Piketty, this guy got his PhD at the age 22 from France, hired by MIT, did some work at MIT. Eventually he said, well, look, the graph that you're seeing on the right was the data that the Kuznets was working with. The higher the gray, the more inequality. You get this dramatic drop in inequality in France, and the same thing in Britain and the United States from 1910 down to 1950. And Piketty said, yeah, I know what Kuznets' data are. I've seen it and so forth. who has updated them? And the MIT professor said, well, we don't do that anymore. We just do the mathematics. So Piketty left and went back to France and said, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to grab some colleagues and we're going to do that. And we're going to update that data. And sure enough,
Who's next?
the Kuznets curve turned out to be wrong. But from 1950 to the present, the inequality has risen in pretty much every society on planet Earth, certainly in the Western societies. We're all very aware of this now. There's not much controversy over this. But this was this Kuznets curve was pretty much the basis for trickle-down economics. Margaret Thatcher, Reagan, blah, blah, blah. So Piketty is going to say, here's one myth that we've sort of gotten rid of with in this book. Capitalist societies do not automatically create more wealth, equal wealth distribution as time goes by. That's just not the case. And in fact, if we're honest about it, what went on there from 1910 to 1950 was that taxes went way the hell up because of war and recovery from war. And frankly, just a lot of wealth was simply destroyed by war. And here we are back in 2014, where inequality is resurging again. And he said, look, inequality is a political issue. It's not an economic issue. There's no economics that make it less. So I'm going to bypass this. I'm looking at my clock and I want to get this stuff. Although, if you remember this, I will at least say it out. Piketty say, look, over time, almost always, if you've got money to invest, your return on capital, R, is almost always going to be greater than the GDP growth in an economy. So if you've got money, you're going to keep pulling away and pulling away and pulling away. You can always make more money than the average worker who's got nothing to invest. And can only gain by his salary going up because there's economic growth. And there's one of his graphs from zero time up to 2022. Say, see, if you had money up there, up top, the black line up top is the return on capital from a long period of time. For most of human history, the economic growth was way below what you could get in terms of profit if you invested. But it's true, he said, it's true. We should all recognize this. In the 62-year period of 1950 to 2012, I'm sorry, economic growth was so stunning that it almost caught up to the rate of return on invested return. And frankly, for a little while, it was even better. Because look at that. Then in 1913, the period 1913 to 1950, the return on capital, the return on capital was actually below growth, primarily because an awful lot of that wealth was taxed. But you can see once we go from 1913 to 1950 up to 1950 to 2012, the growth investment is growing again real fast. And we'll get to the next graph in a minute. I should have done it anyway. So the argument for both these guys, Piketty, Beckley, me, many others, is look, 3.8% growth for 62 years. That's not normal. Humanity may never see that again. Probably will never see that again. Unfortunately, seriously, unfortunately, an awful lot of our presumptions about what we can afford are still based on somehow getting back to that economic growth. For example, the relatively easy affordability of a 1950s like social contract, good education, good healthcare, good housing, retirement, all that can be afforded, these people would say, but it won't be easy. There'll be some real tough decisions to make. The ability of citizens to buy now and pay later, that gets to be a pretty dicey problem if economic growth is going to decrease. I mean, you go into debt. Oh, yeah, I can pay that back because my salary is going to go up because there's economic growth. Well, not if there's no salary increase because there's no economic growth. Or entrepreneurs who borrow to invest and start a new company and assume they can pay it back if their company is successful. Well, it's successful only if there's more economic growth. And maybe most dramatically at all, the ability of governments to run deficits and conveniently be able to pay those deficits back because economic growth gives you the money to pay back loans that were maybe a little bit excessive. And there was Piketty's graph saying, yeah, see what's coming the next what's the next century. Yeah, back to the old story where if you got money to invest, you'll make more than the average worker, because economic growth is just going to decline. Population is going to not go down. He didn't think it was going to go down, but it won't be much. Productivity maybe not as much. And we all familiar with this. You've seen these graphs before. Over on the right and on the left, these are up-to-date numbers. In 1970, the top 10% consumed about 35% of all of this consumed in this country. Right now, it's nearly half. And so, oh God, who's going to go shopping on Black Friday? And if you go just to the top 20%, I mean, this is The Economist last year talking about the economy, or the pre-election stuff. U.S. economy is the envy of the world. Well, it's the envy of the world because the top 20% were consuming like crazy. And most of us in this audience are certainly in that top 20%. I mean, it's so the vast majority of consumption these days is the top 20%. This is a graphic that is, if you've never seen this, it's fairly stunning. Over on the far left, a very dark graph, that's the percentage of wealth held by the top 0.1%. Over on the far right, the wealth held by the bottom 90%. And you can see the trend. In the year 2012, the top 0.1% of America caught up to the bottom 90%, and has been pulling away ever since. We're all familiar with this stuff, and the MAGA crowd is too. They're just confused about who to be angry at. I'm gonna bypass this. That's good stuff. But over on the right is some data from right now. Again, I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't know, but it's always quite stunning. Top 10% owns 67% of the US wealth, top 1%, 29%. The top 0.1%, 13%. The bottom 50% of America owns 2.5% of American wealth. And it keeps getting worse. The richest 8 people in the world have more wealth than the bottom 50%. Good Lord, of the planet now. So this is not new stuff, I think. Piketty displayed this. If you went through Piketty, you say, yeah, I know this. This is a bad crowd. If you never saw this, this Pew piece of research from 2011, I tried to find updating. I couldn't find anything. It is somewhat instructive. Question was asked in various countries, which do you find more important? That no one is need, or everyone has got the freedom to pursue life's goals? American answer in 2011. This is Pew Research. They're pretty reputable for doing a good job. That was the American answer. What it would be now, I don't know. I don't know if it's changed or not. I would hope it has changed. In the UK, in Germany, in France, in Spain, I mean, given our traditional focus on liberty, and if you watched any of the Ken Burns revolution stuff, that word is every other sentence. Liberty, 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 liberty. There's interesting reasons why that's our national myth. Now I'm going to bypass that as well. Back to Piketty. I mean, so there's his graphs for the period that we grew up in, 1950 to 2012, economic growth that almost couldn't possibly ever return, maybe even for a single year, and his predictions for what it would be like for the rest of the 21st century. And he said, look, that's not good. Some of that wealth has got to be used. We've got to redistribute some of that wealth. I would recommend a global wealth tax. Well, what if Piketty's pretty grim predictions were not grim enough? And here we get finally to the author of this article, Michael Beckley, who said, look, productivity growth, which used to be 3 to 4%, is pretty much down to 0 these days. At the same time, the global debt, not just US debt and Japanese debt, but global debt, is going way, way past what anybody ever assumed was reasonable. When the EU was when the Maastricht Treaty established the euro as the European currency for the countries that went in, the rules were no EU country, no euro country could ever go over 60% GDP, 60, what am I saying? Oh, yeah, a total debt of 60% of GDP. And if you did, you were going to be punished. The problem is they never punished anybody. But 60% seemed to be the going notion that you shouldn't go above that. Well, good Lord. Countries are way above that. So it's this what if things are actually a whole lot worse than Piketty predicted only in 14 years. And this is what Beckley sort of gets at. So here's this guy, Beckley. I knew nothing about the guy. He's obviously relatively young. He's a professor at Tufts. I looked him up. I said, well, my God, he works for the American Enterprise Institute. I'm not going to like him whatsoever. And he's worked for the Rand Corporation. But apparently the people, the kids he teaches love the guy. He's got one fantastic rating after another. He's written a couple books. There they are. At least back in 2018, he thought the U.S. was in the best position of any country by far to survive the problems coming, whereas China's got some real problems. There on the right down below, if you want to jot it down as a good podcast, I listened to part of it this morning. He basically just repeats his article. And what's he say up top? He says, "Yeah, we are some of the luckiest people ever to be alive, if we as a species can avoid repeating the worst mistakes of the 21st to 20th century." And on his podcast, he goes on to say, "It's not looking good. Things that I talked about in this article don't seem to be. I'm skeptical about whether they can be solved in the short term." So what are these problems? He says the Democratic, I can't read my own graphic here because it's covered up. What is it? The demographic situation is grim. That the decline, the human population start to decline about 2050. In that period, the only area of the world that's going to have demographic growth is sub-Saharan Africa. And of course, they're poor as hell. And that's half of the component of GDP growth is human population growth. If it begins to falter, well, there goes at least half of your GDP perhaps. And as far as technology goes, he talks a lot about this in his podcast. He says, "Yeah, I don't see it. I know we're in this obsession with how who we are, the investors or the promoters, that AI is going to give us astonishing economic growth from technological achievements." He says, I don't see it. I mean, housing. I mean, yeah, there was an astonishing improvement in human life from 1870 to 1940. But frankly, if a person had to go back and live in a 1940s apartment with a TV and a phone and heating and a refrigerator, they wouldn't want to do it, but it's really not that enormously different than what we've got now. Transport speeds have not gotten a whole lot faster. You read all this stuff. So I'm just repeating most of you read. What else? Longevity has plateaued in most countries. It's even going down in some of the developed countries like us. Many more scientists, not in America anymore, I guess, but productivity is just not going up all that much, despite expenditures. And this runs completely contrary to all the hype over AI. So he says here. He said in the article that I think you read, here's 4 threats that we ought to face. And when I read through this is when I said, whether I'm going to agree with all this or even half of it, at least this guy has put together a scenario with cause and effect that explains so much of the chaos around us, and it's a reassuring intellectual achievement, even though his predictions are not reassuring whatsoever. At least here's a possible explanation for what the hell is going on. One, if you're going to get declining economic growth, then these struggling states, the ones that are really sort of they've been powerful, they're struggling these days. The temptation to go out and try and conquer more territory just to hold on to your political power as a leader, or to give your citizens some sense of we're not in decline. He said Russia's the obvious example with Ukraine, but we know there's going to be peace. We know, I think we surely know Ukraine's going to have to give up some territory, but it's not going to be like Hitler rolling onto Paris in 6 weeks, or half of Russia either, or any of the other imperialistic grabs that the West got from 17 on. It's just not on anymore. They said, China may indeed do the same thing with Taiwan, Pakistan against Afghanistan. There's threats of that. U.S. and Venezuela, for Lord's sake. Look, here's some stats. China and Russia have quintupled their military spending relative to the U.S. But they're just not going to. This is old. This is 20th century stuff. They're not going to achieve all that much. Even though they may achieve something, it won't be that much. Another threat that the fragile economies, the fragile countries of the world, and there are many, are and some of them still have fast-growing populations, but they've got a problem. They got serious problems. In the 19th century, as population went up, you could put most of those people in Britain, in the United States, and France, and Germany in factories. And they were awful jobs, but at least they stayed alive and they produced more wealth. And over time, labor unions and revolutions gave those workers a better life. He said he says the path is closed. Well, the close is maybe a little strong. That's not likely to happen for maybe half of the billion, the 8 billion people on planet Earth. He said, they're alive because we got all this modern medicine that's kept them alive, but there's not necessarily a whole lot of work for them. And what do those countries do? Africa, sub-Saharan Africa's got growing populations, but there's just not the jobs. So of course they immigrate. And India was supposed to put everyone to work. Well, they haven't done it, and they're not likely to do it. And the Middle East is never going to do it. Of course, talking about debt, he didn't mention it, so I throw it in. It's not just the fragile, growing countries that have got serious debts. I mean, there's a graph from The Economist just 2 weeks ago, I think, on debt in the developed world. I mean, the graph is pretty. You got to look at the timeline, 1800 to forecast now. I said, what? Why the hell was developed country debt so high back there in 1810, 1820? The smart historians out there know very well why. It was the French Revolution, the Napoleonic Wars. For us, it was the War of 1812, blah, blah, blah. But the debt came down, rose again with World War II again. But now, the debt's going up, even in a very rich country like us. I mean, look over on the right. I mean, in the year 2020, 2024, our payment on national debt is now a higher percentage of our budget than Medicare and defense combined. There's some suggestions that by 2051, it still will all be dead, but that's not that far away, that the interest on debt will be the biggest line item in the entire federal budget, even bigger than Social Security. I mean, that's not on. That's got to be corrected. A third thing, and we're all familiar with this, that is growth lags the magnificent 30% growth because of AI never materializes. Democracies themselves find themselves in trouble because of wealth distribution problems, and there's anger, trust in government. You all know this stuff. But that's the last line down bottom, which is one of his lines. The democracy thrives during areas of growth, opportunity, cohesion. It's not so clear that democracy can hang in there in areas of stagnation, mass migration. And lastly, he says, and this is, he actually says this in his podcast, this is kind of pretty depressing. The one country you sort of depend on, the richest country in the world by far, most powerful still, problems still, but was supposed to be the leader for coalescing a new global consensus about what to do about the coming problems, and we're just unraveling. And we're all, again, disturbingly familiar with what the hell is going on with Trump in this mud case, but we're shredding our values. He says this is exactly what went on as the two world wars approached, and countries sort of buckled down, became insular, and talked and super nationalistic and blah blah blah. He does say, if you read the article, it could be better. It could be better. There's reason for optimism. In the long term, this is almost certainly going to be better for humanity. You 80-year-olds are all going to be dead, and your kids may be dead too, but maybe the grandkids, maybe the great-great-grandkids, maybe, because a less population growth, managing that well could be really good. The mass that has been created by these rising powers the last 200 years has really been pretty, frankly, awful for most humanity. Not for us, and so we sort of ignore how awful it's been. But maybe if this catastrophic chapter can end and be well managed, he said, there is better technological improvement. The health is getting better. There's the possibility of learning more, live long lives, and so that if it's well managed, that could be good. Of course, he never goes on to say, so I've said it down below in red, for those technological benefits to be peacekeeping, they've got to be spread around a good deal more equitably and on the basis of need than what the market says. And good luck on getting that priority to emerge in the current. And he goes on to say, and there's a deal to be made with sub-Saharan Africa. They got people with no jobs. We're going to have, and Japan is going to have, and Germany is going to have, and China's going to have a need for work and jobs, and the Africans would love to do them, and we get the money. And so if you could come up with a symbiosis, of course, means both sides benefit. There's a deal to be had, but of course, getting that arranged is fairly unlikely. So I got that done. That's rather amazing. I was gonna, since I got this, no, since I'm gonna throw this in because, so what? Just because, I mean, any of you watched this? BBC had a wonderful series on called The Human. It was showed on. Help me out, Jan. On our. Oh, Nova. You could pick up Nova and watch the Fosters. It was really quite good. I mean, both Jen and I weren't thrilled with the woman that narrates it, but the story is pretty good. The rise of Homo sapiens was anything but a foregone conclusion. And there was a whole lot of luck involved, and so forth and so forth. And above all, the notion that we have to recognize that our ability to cooperate and share knowledge was what got us through. Last February, Jen and I were, and Jen couldn't join this part of it. I was in Tikal in Guatemala. Some of you have been there. It's stunning. But of course, it was even more stunning before it was ruined. And that's what it was like when the Europeans discovered it 5,000. Human beings can go to hell in a handbasket. And then, of course, there's this. And I don't know why this Beckley doesn't mention it whatsoever. The global warming. I mean, it's already started to happen. This mass migration because of people that cannot live on the land they once lived on. There's estimates that by 2050, there could be 1.2 billion people on the move. There's already been 500,000. And Europe and the United States and China are not going to accept those people. So what the hell happens there with these? Now we're done.
Come here. Come.
So that won't raise any issues whatsoever. It's The guy, to repeat, the reason I was so enamored of this article was because he's got a vision of cause and effect, which makes so much of the what apparent random chaos around the world cohere into a rather a single vision. Yeah.
Call
Population
from
decline.
Stephen Monroe.
So you might ask if anyone has questions.
Yeah, so comments.
Call from Stephen Monroe.
So-
Get a call.
No,
Hilda, you gotta
I
mute.
just muted her. Does anyone have any questions of Ramsay before we go? I see Tajiko.
Yes, I was wondering if any of your economics people talked about an AI bubble.
Oh, yeah. In fact, apparently I was told this morning that one of the three guys that shorted the housing bubble is already shorting AI right now. I mean,
Oh, uh-huh.
you all read the Big Short or whatever, at least saw the movie.
Yeah.
One of those guys is back. Of course, he's got access to $1 billion, so he can make a lot of. I can short AI tomorrow for $300. Yeah,
Oh, we know you have $1 billion. Come on.
it's almost a guarantee. AI is going to be useful down the road, but as useful as the current. Here's another thing I hadn't heard it over the weekend. I mean, Meta, the various social network forms have been loaded with cash. Meta has now spent so much money buying into AI that it's borrowing money, um, which is exactly the scenario in 1929. We're going to make so much money that we can afford to borrow because we're going to make all this money back in the future. And if the bubble crashes, I mean, it's not just, well, government bailout and we'll be back to normal in about 3 years. This is big time stuff. So sell now, guys. Yes, Irene.
I got two questions. One is that I would really like to have access to the recordings of this because as usual, Ramsay, it's a
Too
fantastic
much. Yeah,
presentation.
well, two things. One, the recording, Janet or John will send it out. And two, just send, Irene, I'll send you the PowerPoint.
That's cool. But having your voiceover is really cool.
No.
So that's why I'll look forward to that. But the other part is, how do we distill this into something that we do now in politics? And I guess that's where we need Janet to come back.
Well,
and
but
tell
that's
us the
exactly the right
answer.
question. And that's exactly what's so irritating about this goddamn article. He says, if it could be managed, and that's in the last paragraph. He said,
Yeah,
well,
right.
you want to give us some hints about how it could be managed?
Yeah, right. Really, really.
And,
But that's kind of how Piketty ended
Yeah.
too. And now you've got Gabriel Zuckman, and there's some talk of a global tax in the EU. Who knows? Who knows? Just to make sure we get the recording, Janet, when you close out, you'll see, because we told them to load it to your computer.
Yes.
When you sign out, you'll see that they'll be downloading what they've recorded into a file. And so you take that file and put it on a thumb drive, and I'll come and get it. I think that's the way to do it. It'll probably be on Saturday. Will you be home Saturday?
We'll be home Saturday. I'll be home.
Okay, we'll figure it
John's
out.
in San Diego now, but he's coming back soon. John and Ike are both in San Diego.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And I want to thank you, Ramsay, for taking this over and for Janet to figure out how we could do this. So,
Our pleasure.
So Irene, so I know we're going to over it's 3 o'clock. People got to go or they've already gone. Why don't we, if we're going to do another session next week, let's start off with that question. So how does this get managed?
Right.
And,
Right.
and one thing that's already in mind. I'm going to go back to Europe post World War II and the at least 10 slides on how the EU got put together and what that took.
Right.
Thank you. Have the floor together again. And I need to read this and review this before Tuesday. So I'm looking forward to being able to, as always, it's so packed with information. I'm still thinking about what Ramsay said in the first 5 minutes, but now we're at the end.
We never got to the Warriors. What about the Warriors game?
Well, I'd like to have some discussion of how a wealth tax would be implemented.
Yeah,
How,
okay, let's do that. Let's
how
do
would
that.
that happen? If that's the recommendation from Piketty and others.
It's one thing to talk about a national wealth tax. How would a global wealth tax be? I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Good luck. We're humor. Maybe that's a question for great grandkids.
Yeah, yeah.
If they weren't.
Yeah, but we managed to get reforms on the minimal corporate tax to keep corporations from pitting countries against each other in a race to the bottom, right? Where Apple, their corporate headquarters are at a mailbox in Ireland.
Right.
That's not gonna that actually
It got solved.
got done. So who knows with the global wealth tax?
Well, Homer, you're reminding me that one thing that another thing that could, as a presentation, it's a useful one, is to go back to John Maynard Keynes' proposal back at Bretton Woods for what he wanted to happen as a global financial arrangement, and came close to happening, except he was in the wrong meeting when the decision was made. And Dexter White, our finance minister, outvoted him, and the dollar became the international currency. John Maynard Keynes had a pretty good idea, and that there are people out there that are trying to revise that. So we can talk about that.
Okay, so thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
yeah. Happy Thanksgiving, and we'll get the tape out soon.
Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
All the best.